Okay, so we're diving into something interesting today.
Yeah.
A quote from economist Thomas Sowell's book, Barbarians Inside the Gates.
Okay.
And this quote really kind of makes you think about like wealth and fairness and how we talk about it.
Yeah.
So you've been reading this, right? What jumped out at you about this Sowell quote?
Well, this quote really stood out to me because it challenges how we usually think about wealth. It makes you question some common assumptions.
Right, right. Like it seems like whenever we talk about money, there's this automatic assumption the wanting more is somehow bad or wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And Sowell really kind of picks at that, doesn't he? He uses the word greed, which is
Yeah.
loaded, right? Like as soon as you hear greed, you think, oh, that's
It's
bad.
like this instant judgment, right? Greedy equals bad.
Yeah, and Sowell's saying, well, hold on a minute, let's unpack that a bit. Is it always bad to want to hold on to what you've earned?
Yeah, that's a good point because if we're talking about someone who earned their wealth through, let's say, hard work or innovation,
Right.
is it still greed to not want to give it up?
That's the question Sowell wants us to ask. And it's interesting, right? Because he flips the script a bit, he says, well, what about the desire to take what someone else has earned? Is that a form of greed too?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, like we often talk about income inequality
Right.
and the need for redistribution, but we rarely stop to think about the other side of that coin.
Exactly. And that's what makes Sowell so insightful. He forces you to confront your own biases.
So what you're saying is, so wasn't necessarily saying like one side is good or bad, right?
No, not at all.
He's more like just saying, hey, let's think about this a little deeper.
Yes, exactly. He wants us to question those automatic assumptions, those knee-jerk reactions we have, and look at things from multiple angles. He's all about individual responsibility and the power of free markets, and he's skeptical of government intervention.
Hmm. That's a really interesting way to approach this topic, and it's something that I think a lot of people don't really think about.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in slogans and labels. But Sowell always reminds us to dig a little deeper.
I like that. Dig a little deeper.
Hmm.
So, okay, let's say we accept that premise, that it's not always greed to want to keep what you've earned.
Okay.
Where do we go from there? Like, how do we even begin to have productive conversation about things like wealth and fairness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think for Sowell, it always starts with individual responsibility and understanding that life isn't always going to be fair.
Right, everyone's dealt a different hand, right?
Exactly. And some people are born into privilege. Others have to work harder to get ahead. That's just the reality.
Okay, so given all that, how do we then address things like poverty or lack of opportunity? If we just focus on personal responsibility, doesn't that ignore the systemic issues that might be holding people back?
Right. And that's where things get tricky because Sowell would argue that often the very policies designed to help the poor can sometimes end up trapping them in a cycle of dependence. He really believed in empowering people to lift themselves up through hard work and opportunity.
So it's more about creating an environment where everyone has the chance to succeed rather than just redistributing wealth that already exists.
That's a big part of it, yeah. It's about creating a system where hard work and talent are rewarded and where people have the freedom to pursue their own goals.
That makes sense. So instead of focusing on taking from the haves to give to the have-nots,
Right.
we should be focusing on making it easier for everyone to become a have in the first place.
Exactly. Sowell was a big believer in that.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I mean, I think Sowell's quote really challenges us to reconsider some of our assumptions.
It does.
It makes you really think about the implications of our words.
It does, yeah.
Like when we use a word like greed, are we really thinking critically about what that means? Or are we just using it as a way to shut down a conversation?
That's a great point to end on because I think a lot of times that's exactly what happens. We resort to these labels without really examining what they mean or what the implications are.
It's a good reminder to always question our assumptions and to be willing to see things from different perspectives, even if we don't always agree with them.
Absolutely. That's what makes these conversations so valuable.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive here. Thanks for joining me. It's always great to chat with you and to, dive into these complex ideas.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy it.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. We hope this conversation has sparked some new ideas and maybe even challenged some of your own assumptions. Remember, there's always more to learn and more to explore, so keep those minds open and keep questioning the world around you.
Here, here.